Welcome into Dealing with the Devils. It's Jack and JD, and the Blue Devils just had a nice road victory over Wake Forest, 84-70, led by Grayson Allen. 17 points, 6 assists on the night, but also the junior brothers, if you will. 23 points and 12 rebounds from Wendell and 19 points for Gary. Just a very solid performance all around for the Blue Devils tonight, and they got the lead early and they carried it throughout the game.
I was very nervous about this game going into Wake, but really from start to finish, there really wasn't much of a contest here. Got maybe to Duke was really in control start to finish.
Right. And, Duke really had a good game tonight where they've just kind of grinded their way through this one. Wake Forest, I felt early on, had a little bit more energy than Duke, but they were just far too talented. Wake Forest was also missing a solid guard for them who scores about 12 points a game, and the Blue Devils starters were really just too much for Wake Forest. Although Darrell Moore was giving them some difficulties in the first half, Brandon Childress gave them some difficulties in the second half, but there just wasn't enough from Wake Forest to deal with Carter, Bagley, Allen, and Gary Trent.
That's definitely true, and certainly the big fellow for Wake.
Darrell Moore.
At one point, I think 9 offensive rebounds, and just seemed to be dunking at will. But as you say, there just wasn't enough to go around to make up for this, and they made a nice run. Duke was up by 20, cut it to about 8, but then Duke brought it right back and was in control right through the end of the game.
Right, and that was led by Brandon Childress, former teammate, high school teammate of Harry Giles, and was a guy who I thought was pretty solid in high school. Was a bit under-recruited, but he's settled in at Wake Forest and had a nice start to his career and has played well against the Blue Devils when he's had a chance. The Blue Devils, the one guy we haven't talked about is Trevon Duval, and the other 4 starters had great games. Duval had easily his worst game as a Blue Devil. He didn't score on the night on 8 shot attempts, only 2 assists, and really down the stretch they played O'Connell instead of Duval. Duval just didn't have it tonight. It was clear. And, he'd been struggling the past several games. JD has been harping on that the last several recaps here. And, JD, what do you have any thoughts on what you saw for a brief bit in the second half?
I gotta say that he seemed just not to be in the flow. And, this is something we've talked about before, which is, you're the point guard, you're supposed to be in control. So even if you're not going to score, there's so many ways in which you can contribute. And tonight, there just was virtually nothing from him. So I do understand the need to go with Alex O'Connell, and a little bit disappointing, but he's got time to find himself, like between now and shall we say Saturday.
Right, yes, and we'll get there in a couple minutes here, but I think for Duval, he needs to have a defensive focus. I don't know if he's really ever had to have that in his career, but I think that would just help him settle in. Perhaps he'd get a steal, get out in the open court, get an easy bucket, because when he's able to get a transition bucket or a nice layup opportunity, that usually gets him going. And today he really wasn't able to get anything easy for himself. And again, another thing we've discussed is they don't really run any pick and roll. And to me, if Duval were to have some of those opportunities, I think he could get himself in a better rhythm, but it's just not part of their offense right now. And so therefore he's going to have to find other ways to contribute, as JD said.
Well, let me ask you this. If you were going to describe their offense, what would you say?
I would say that, they run it through Carter and Bagley I would say maybe 3 out of 10 possessions. Some possessions are designed for a three-pointer for Trent or Allen. Maybe that's 1 or 2 more. And the other 5 are really, I would almost just say whatever happens on that given possession. There doesn't seem to be much of a plan in place.
No, and this is going to prove to be a sticking point. Clearly, in Saturday's game, where I think Virginia won tonight, something like 61-35,
yeah.
And that's exactly where Virginia wants the game. And I think, Jack, you pointed it out last time. A game in the 60s with Virginia is going to be a rough game for Duke, even at home. Game in the upper 70s or 80s, then Duke will be fine. But if Virginia has their way, it is going to be a hard thing. And that's why the things we're pointing out tonight, Trevon Duval not running the offense, about there not being a good flow that we pointed out in other times. If the offense stymies, this is going to be a problem against a team like Virginia.
Right, exactly. And, let's get into it, I guess, then. Because Virginia's defense is so stout that if your offense doesn't have good rhythm, good ball movement, where you're able to move the defense from side to side, it's going to be really difficult to score on them. And if you're not able to get buckets early on, which is tough to do against them because they get their defense back in set, it's going to be a tough night for you, and that's what keeps their opponents down in the 60s, or tonight's case in the 30s with Clemson, although it was their first game without their best player. But still, that defense that Virginia has played for the past several seasons since Tony Bennett has got there is it's the best defense in the conference. It's usually up there for the best defense in the country, and each year it has, the Blue Devils do struggle with it, but the key to their success against it has been when they're able to score early, score before the defense has been able to get set. That's going to be something to watch for on Saturday.
The other thing I want to watch for on Saturday is what do we shoot from three-point range, because stifling defense means it's going to be hard to get to the basket, and if they can get their three-point shots going, forcing Virginia to have to come out, that's going to make life easier for the two bigs.
Great point, JD. Great point. And Allen looked better tonight. Early on in the first half, he hit all 7 of his free throws. Gary Trent he continued his hot shooting performance, although I guess he cooled off a little bit just to post really good shooting numbers tonight instead of extraordinary. But yeah, both of those guys are going to have to shoot really well. In addition to, you're going to have to get something from three-point range from hopefully Duval or O'Connell off the bench, who is, I thought, he provided a spark tonight. It's the first time he scored in the past couple games. He had 7 points. He had a 3. He had a nice putback, lay-in, and, he was just very active. And that's really what they're going to need from him. And Delorier, who, he somehow manages to have great moments and also foul out in less than 10 minutes almost consistently. So he's going to provide good energy for them as well. And I think you see, this is going to be the 7-man rotation that he uses with Delorier and O'Connell. We'll see if Bolden is able to get back into it when he's healthy. But for now, it looks like those 7 guys, and as JD said, on Saturday, look for the three-point shooting numbers to be key against Virginia.
Well, so one thing that I might say is a pair of wild cards. Look for a pair of threes from the Vice Admiral. If he has a chance to come in and the rotation isn't working the way he wants, the extraordinary thing about young Mr. Robinson has been his three-point shooting. And we've seen it now twice where he's come up with a pair of three-pointers, and he's not afraid to shoot from three-point range. And so if Coach K isn't getting it from the other players, look for the wild card here being young Mr. Robinson.
All right, well, we'll see you guys on Saturday afternoon where JD and I will have a bit more energy after a big game against Virginia. That's it for Dealing with the Devils.